The diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge hung in the void between worlds, its sleek hull reflecting the cold starlight of the neutral zone. Within its luxurious main chamber, Kestra Thaneborn stood with the poise of nobility, her pale blue skin luminescent under the ship's ambient lighting. Her red hair cascaded in waves down her back, each strand seeming to hold fire within its depths. She wore the ceremonial robes of her house, deep crimson silk that complemented her exotic coloring and marked her as daughter to Warlord Thane of Vaelthara. Across the chamber, Commander Jackson Reed of the Terran Defense Corps studied her with eyes like winter storms. His dark hair was regulation short, his uniform impeccable, but there was something hollow in his gaze that spoke of old wounds. At 32, he carried himself with military precision, yet Kestra could sense the weight of sorrow that bent his shoulders. "You're even more beautiful than the hollow transmission suggested," Jackson said, his voice carefully neutral. "My compliments to your father on producing such an asset for negotiation." Kestra's violet eyes flashed with indignation, but she maintained her diplomatic composure. "I am Kestra, daughter of Thane, trained in 7 forms of combat and fluent in 12 languages. I am no mere asset, Commander Reed." "Of course not." He turned toward the viewport, hands clasped behind his back. "You're a political tool. A very lovely, very intelligent political tool designed to cement an alliance between our peoples." His reflection in the transparent aluminum showed a man fighting demons. "But I won't be party to this charade." The words hit Kestra like a physical blow. In all her preparation, through years of diplomatic training and cultural studies, she had never considered outright rejection. Suitors had competed for her attention on Vaelthara. Her beauty, intelligence, and royal bloodline made her one of the most sought-after brides in 3 systems. "You refuse me?" Her voice carried the dangerous quiet of a gathering storm. Jackson finally turned to face her, and she saw the pain that haunted him. "I loved someone once, Elena Vasquez, a brilliant xenobiologist. She died in a Corthani raid 2 years ago." His jaw tightened. "I won't dishonor her memory by entering a marriage of convenience, no matter how politically expedient." Kestra felt heat rise in her cheeks, not the flush of embarrassment, but the burn of rage inherited from generations of warriors. "Dishonor? Her memory? What of the dishonor you show me? What of the insult to my father and our entire civilization?" "I'm sorry," Jackson said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "I'm sure you'll find another suitable husband, someone who can appreciate your qualities." The dismissal was too much. Kestra had sacrificed her freedom, her choice in love, her very future for the sake of peace between their worlds. She had studied human culture, learned their customs, prepared herself to be the perfect bride for this stranger, only to be rejected like damaged goods. Moving with fluid grace that spoke of her combat training, Kestra approached the chamber's control panel. Her fingers danced across the holographic interface with practiced precision. "What are you doing?" Jackson demanded, stepping toward her. "Engaging full ship lockdown," Kestra replied, her voice deadly calm. Warning lights began to flash red throughout the chamber. Communications blackout, navigation freeze, docking clamps sealed. Jackson's eyes widened as the implications hit him. "You can't." "I can and I have." Kestra turned to face him, her violet eyes blazing with determination. "The diplomatic codes my father provided give me emergency command authority over this vessel. You said you won't be my husband, Commander Reed. Very well, but you will understand me." The ship's computer announced in its neutral tone. "Lockdown initiated. Estimated orbital decay in 14 standard days without intervention." Jackson stared at her in disbelief. "You've trapped us both." "Yes," Kestra said, lifting her chin with regal defiance. "If you won't be mine by choice, then you'll at least know me by necessity. Perhaps by the time our air runs out, you'll comprehend what you've thrown away." Outside the viewport, the stars watched in eternal silence as 2 hearts began their reluctant dance. 3 days into their orbital prison, The Harmony's edge had become a battlefield of wills. Jackson had exhausted every override code in his repertoire, tried manual bypasses on 17 different systems, and even attempted to jury-rig a distress beacon from his personal communicator. Each effort met the same result. Kestra's pale blue fingers dancing across control panels, her violet eyes holding a mixture of amusement and determination. The environmental systems will fail before the diplomatic locks, she informed him as he emerged from yet another failed attempt at the auxiliary power coupling. You're wasting your strength. Jackson wiped sweat from his brow, his uniform disheveled from crawling through maintenance shafts. My strength is my concern. Unlike some people, I don't abandon my responsibilities when things don't go my way. Kestra rose from the meditation cushion where she'd been performing her morning ritual, a series of flowing movements that reminded Jackson uncomfortably of a deadly dance. Abandon my responsibilities? Her voice carried the edge of a blade. I am fulfilling them. My duty is to secure peace between our peoples by any means necessary. By holding us both hostage, by making you see beyond your grief to the bigger picture. She moved to the food synthesizer, her movements graceful despite her obvious frustration. Tell me about Elena. The question hit Jackson like a physical blow. What? Your lost love. If I'm to understand why you'd rather die than marry me, I should know about her. Kestra's tone was matter-of-fact, but there was something else underneath. Genuine curiosity mixed with wounded pride. Jackson turned away, staring at the stars beyond the viewport. For 3 days he'd maintained his anger, used it as armor against the growing awareness of Kestra's presence. But exhaustion was wearing him down, and the constant proximity to this enigmatic woman was affecting him in ways he didn't want to acknowledge. She was brilliant, he said finally. Elena could see patterns in alien biology that others missed. She saved hundreds of lives during the Proxima Plague outbreak. His voice softened. She had this laugh, like silver bells. And she loved terrible human poetry. Kestra moved to stand beside him at the viewport close enough that he could smell her scent, something like exotic flowers and starlight. How did she die? Korthani raiders hit the research station where she was working. By the time we arrived, Jackson's hands clenched into fists. She was trying to evacuate the children from the nursery ward. A plasma blast brought down half the building. She died a hero's death, Kestra said quietly. On Velthera, we honor such sacrifice with songs that last generations. Jackson looked at her, surprised by the genuine respect in her voice. What about you? Any tragic loves in your past? A bitter smile crossed Kestra's lips. Love was a luxury I was never permitted. From the age of 12, I knew I would be married for alliance. My training focused on duty, diplomacy, and the arts of pleasing a husband I had never met. She touched the viewport, her reflection ghost-like in the transparent surface. I used to dream about choosing for myself. Foolish, perhaps. For the first time since boarding the ship, Jackson really looked at her, not as an obstacle or a political symbol, but as a woman. He saw past the exotic beauty to something deeper, loneliness that matched his own. I'm sorry, he said, and meant it. Kestra turned to face him, her violet eyes searching his face. Are you? Or are you simply feeling sorry for yourself? The challenge in her voice rekindled his anger. I'm not the one who sealed us in here like children having a tantrum. No. You're the one who rejected a treaty that could prevent war between our peoples because you're afraid to let go of a ghost. Kestra stepped closer, her chin raised defiantly. Elena is dead, Commander. Your guilt won't bring her back. Jackson's control snapped. Don't you dare. What? Speak the truth? Kestra's voice rose to match his. You think I don't understand loss? My mother died when I was 8. Assassinated by rivals who thought a female heir made my father weak. I've lived every day since knowing I might die for political convenience. They stood facing each other, breathing hard, the space between them crackling with tension. Jackson found himself noticing details he'd tried to ignore. The way her red hair caught the light, the elegant curve of her neck, the fire in her alien eyes that spoke of passion beneath the diplomatic veneer. This isn't about Elena, he realized aloud. This is about you proving you're not just another political pawn. Kestra's expression flickered with surprise, then something that might have been respect. Perhaps you're not as obtuse as I thought. And perhaps you're not as heartless as you pretend to be. They stared at each other in silence, both breathing heavily from their confrontation. The air between them seemed charged with more than anger now, something neither was ready to acknowledge. Finally, Kestra turned away. Dinner will be ready in an hour. Try not to electrocute yourself attempting another escape before then. As she walked away, Jackson couldn't help but notice the sway of her hips, the proud set of her shoulders. For the first time in 2 years, he felt something other than grief stir in his chest. Outside their orbital prison, the countdown continued, but inside, something had shifted in the delicate balance between captor and captive. By the 7th day, their arguments had evolved into conversations. Jackson found himself looking forward to their meals together, drawn by Kestra's sharp intelligence and unexpected humor. She told him stories of Valthura, a world of crystalline cities and aurora-painted skies, where warrior poets ruled with sword and verse. My father once dueled a rival using only haikus, she said over dinner, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Each line had to land a metaphorical blow while maintaining proper syllable count. The match lasted 3 hours. Jackson nearly choked on his synthesized protein. You're making that up. I am not. Valthurans take our poetry very seriously. We believe words have the power to wound or heal as surely as any blade. She leaned forward, studying his face. What do humans use for courtship? I've read your literature, but I suspect the reality is different. Usually dinner and a movie, Jackson said, then had to explain the concept of recreational entertainment to her fascination. Though Elena preferred hiking, she said being in nature helped her think. It was the first time he'd mentioned Elena without pain, tightening his chest. Kestra noticed, her expression softening. She sounds like she was worthy of your love, she said quietly. She was. Jackson met her eyes. I'm sorry I compared you unfavorably to her. That wasn't fair. No, it wasn't. Kestra's smile took the sting from her words. But I'm beginning to understand why you did it. Humans form such deep attachments. On Valthura, we're taught that love is a weakness that can be exploited. Maybe that's why you're so strong, Jackson said. You've never had the chance to be vulnerable. Something flickered in Kestra's violet eyes, surprise perhaps, or recognition. Is that what love is? Vulnerability? Part of it. Elena used to say that love was choosing to trust someone with the power to destroy you, and believing they won't use it. Kestra was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the table's surface. I've never trusted anyone that completely. Even my father, especially my father. What's he like? Brilliant, ruthless. He loves me in his way, but I've always been a tool in his arsenal. She looked up at Jackson. Do you know what he told me before I left for this mission? Make him want you, daughter. A man who desires you will be easier to control. Jackson felt a flash of anger on her behalf. You're more than a tool. Am I? Kestra's voice held genuine uncertainty. I was designed to be the perfect bride. Beautiful, intelligent, trained in the arts of pleasure and diplomacy. But I don't know who I am beyond that role. Without thinking, Jackson reached across the table and covered her hand with his. Her skin was warm despite its pale blue hue, and he felt her pulse quicken at the contact. You're brave, he said. Brave enough to lock us both in here rather than accept rejection. Brave enough to risk everything for what you believe in. Kestra stared at their joined hands, her breathing shallow. Jackson. The way she said his name sent heat coursing through him. When had he stopped seeing her as an alien and started seeing her as a woman? When had her exotic beauty become simply beautiful? He started to pull his hand away, but she caught his wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. Don't, she whispered. Please don't pull away again. They sat frozen, connected by touch and something deeper. A recognition of shared loneliness, of wounds that might heal together. Jackson could feel his carefully constructed walls crumbling. Kestra, I know. Her voice was barely audible. I know you're not ready. I know you may never be. But I need you to know that this... She gestured between them. This isn't just political anymore. Not for me. Jackson looked into her eyes and saw his own confusion reflected there. How had they moved from hostility to this tentative connection? When had her presence become a comfort, rather than a reminder of his obligations? I'm scared, he admitted. So am I. She smiled, and it transformed her face from beautiful to radiant. Perhaps we can be scared together. He squeezed her hand gently, and she squeezed back. Outside the viewport, the stars continued their eternal dance. But inside the ship, two hearts were learning a new rhythm. Later that night, as they prepared for sleep in their separate quarters, Jackson found himself standing at his door, hand hovering over the control panel. Down the corridor, he could hear Kestra moving about her room, and he wondered if she was struggling with the same restless energy that plagued him. For the first time since Elena's death, he felt the stirring of something that might, eventually, become love. On the 10th day, the pretense between them finally shattered. It began with a systems malfunction, a power fluctuation that plunged the ship into emergency lighting. Jackson was in the engine room, attempting to reroute power, when Kestra appeared, beside him with a toolkit and knowledge of Valtherani engineering that complemented his human training. The harmonic resonance is off, she said, her shoulder brushing his as she reached for a coupling. If we synchronize the phase variance, yes, he breathed. But he wasn't talking about the repair anymore. The proximity, the shared purpose, the way she bit her lower lip in concentration, it all combined to overwhelm his remaining defenses. When the lights flickered back to full power, they were still standing close together, tools forgotten in their hands. Kestra looked up at him, her violet eyes wide with the same desire he felt coursing through his body. Jackson, she whispered, and this time his name was a prayer. He cupped her face in his hands, marveling at the softness of her pale blue skin, the way her red hair felt like silk against his fingers. I can't promise you forever. I can't promise I'll be able to let go of the past completely. I don't need promises, she said, rising on her toes to bring her lips closer to his. I need you. Here. Now. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, question asked and answered. Then Kestra's arms wound around his neck and gentle became urgent. Jackson had forgotten how it felt to be wanted, to have someone respond to his touch with such honest passion. Your quarters or mine? She murmured against his lips. Yours, he said, surprising himself. I want to see you in your own space. Kestra's room was a revelation. Not the austere diplomatic suite he'd expected, but a space filled with personal touches. Tapestries from her homeworld covered the walls, depicting scenes of crystalline cities and violet sunsets. Crystals hung from the ceiling, casting prismatic patterns across the room. Her bed was large and covered in fabrics that shimmered like starlight. It's beautiful, Jackson said, meaning both the room and the woman who stood before him. I wanted something that felt like home, Kestra said. Then her expression grew serious. Are you certain about this? I won't be another regret for you to carry. Instead of answering with words, Jackson began to undress her with reverent hands. Her ceremonial robes fell away to reveal a body that was alien yet perfect. Pale blue skin, marked with intricate silver tattoos that told the story of her lineage, curves that were both familiar and exotic. You're magnificent, he breathed, and she blushed. A darker blue that was somehow even more beautiful. Kestra's hands were equally curious, exploring the differences between human and Valtherani anatomy with wonder. You're so warm, she murmured, pressing her lips to his chest, like touching a star. Their lovemaking was a conversation in a language older than words, gentle, then passionate, tender, then fierce. Kestra showed him techniques from her world, movements that were both combat and caress. Jackson brought his own intensity, the desperate need of a man learning to love again. Afterward, they lay entwined among the shimmering fabrics, their breathing slowly returning to normal. Kestra traced patterns on Jackson's chest while he wound, her red hair around his fingers. "I have a confession," she said quietly. "What's that?" "I've never felt anything like this before. My training covered the mechanics of pleasure, but not—" She gestured vaguely at the space between them. "Not this connection." Jackson tilted her chin up so he could look into her eyes. "You mean you've never—" "I'm not inexperienced," she said quickly. "But this is different. With you, I feel like I'm discovering who I really am, not just playing a role I was trained for." He kissed her forehead gently. "I know what you mean. I thought I'd never feel this way about anyone again." "And Elena?" The question was soft, without jealousy. Jackson considered carefully. "I'll always love her. She'll always be part of me. But what I feel for you, it's not a replacement or a substitute, it's something entirely new." Kestra smiled, her face radiant with happiness. "I love you, Jackson Reed. I know it's too soon. I know the circumstances are impossible. But I needed to say it." "I love you too," he said, the words coming easier than he'd expected. "God help me. I love you too." They made love again, slower this time, with the tenderness of acknowledged emotion. Outside their cabin, warning lights continued to flash, reminders that their stolen time was running out. But for these precious hours they existed in a world of their own making, where touch was truth and passion was promise. As dawn broke, over whatever world they were orbiting, they lay in each other's arms, finally understanding what they stood to lose, and what they might be willing to fight for. "The fleets will be here soon," Kestra said, her voice barely audible. "I know. Whatever happens, I want you to know these days with you have been the freest I've ever felt." Jackson held her tighter, breathing in her scent, memorizing the feel of her in his arms. "Then we'll find a way to stay free. Together." But even as he spoke the words, they both knew that their greatest challenge lay ahead. Love was one thing. Surviving the political firestorm they'd created was another entirely. The alarms began on the 14th day, just as their orbital decay was reaching critical levels. Kestra and Jackson stood together on the bridge, hands clasped, watching as two fleets materialized from hyperspace, the sleek silver vessels of the Terran Defense Corps and the crystalline warships of the Violtherani Empire. "Unidentified vessel, this is Admiral Morrison of the TDC flagship Resolute," crackled through the comm system. "Stand down your weapons and prepare to be boarded." Simultaneously, another voice cut through, harsh and commanding. "Daughter, this is your father. Release the locks and surrender the human. You have shamed our house enough." Kestra's face went pale, but her grip on Jackson's hand tightened. "He brought the entire 7th Fleet. He means to end this decisively. And Morrison's got half the home fleet with him," Jackson observed grimly. "One wrong move and we'll have the war we were supposed to prevent. Harmony's Edge, respond immediately or we will consider your silence an act of aggression," Morrison's voice continued. Kestra moved to the communications panel, her movements decisive. "Then we don't stay silent." She opened a channel to both fleets. "This is Kestra Thaneborn aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge. I speak for both myself and Commander Jackson Reed." "Kestra, stand down immediately," Warlord Thane's voice boomed through the speakers. "You will not embarrass our people further with this childish display." "Childish?" Kestra's voice carried the regal authority of her bloodline. "Father, I have spent 14 days learning what our peoples could truly become together. Not through forced marriage or political convenience, but through genuine understanding." Jackson stepped forward, his military bearing evident even in his rumpled civilian clothes. "Admiral Morrison, this is Commander Reed. I formally request permission to address both fleets." "Jackson, what are you doing?" Kestra whispered. "Something Elena would have done," he replied. "The right thing regardless of the cost." The comm channel crackled with crosstalk between the fleets before Morrison's voice returned. "You have 2 minutes, Commander. Make them count." Jackson took a deep breath, then began to speak with the conviction of a man who had found his purpose again. 2 weeks ago I was a broken man, haunted by loss and closed to the possibility of love. I looked at the woman beside me and saw only a political obligation, a beautiful stranger who represented everything I wanted to avoid. He turned to Kestra, drawing strength from her violet eyes. "I was wrong. Kestra Thaneborn is not a tool of diplomacy or a prize to be won. She is a woman of extraordinary courage, intelligence, and compassion. She is also the woman I choose to love." Murmurs of shock rippled through both fleets' comm channels. "But more than that," Jackson continued, "our time together has shown me what true alliance could look like. Not marriage for political gain, but partnership based on mutual respect and understanding. Our peoples have so much to offer each other, if we can move beyond fear and suspicion." Kestra activated her own audio pickup. "My father taught me that love is weakness, that emotion compromises judgment. But I have learned that love can also be strength, the strength to risk everything for something greater than yourself." Her voice grew stronger, carrying the trained power of diplomatic oratory. "I stand before you not as a dutiful daughter or a political pawn, but as a woman who has chosen her own path. I choose love over duty, partnership over domination, hope over fear." "Enough!" Warlord Thane's roar shook the speakers. "You forget yourself, daughter. You will return immediately and accept whatever punishment I deem appropriate. And you, Commander," Admiral Morrison's voice was ice cold, "are in direct violation of your orders. Prepare to be arrested for dereliction of duty." Jackson and Kestra exchanged a look of understanding. They had known this moment would come, the choice between love and loyalty, between personal happiness and duty to their peoples. "Then I guess we're about to find out how much our choice matters," Kestra murmured. She opened a final broadcast channel, this one transmitting to both fleets simultaneously. "To all who can hear this, witness what we have learned. Love does not make us weak. It makes us willing to be strong for something beyond ourselves." With that, she began to lower the ship's shields, a gesture of ultimate vulnerability that would leave them defenseless against either fleet's weapons. "Kestra, no." Jackson reached for the controls, but she caught his hand. "Trust me," she said. "Trust us." The shields flickered and died. For a moment that stretched into eternity, the Harmony's Edge hung defenseless between two hostile fleets, its only protection the love shared by its two occupants. Then something unexpected happened. On the Valtharani flagship, a junior officer stood at her station. "Warlord, the crew requests permission to speak." "Granted," Thane growled. "Sir, your daughter has shown the courage of a true warrior. Perhaps there is wisdom in her choice." Similar murmurs began on the human ships. Elena's sacrifice had made her a hero to many in the fleet, and Jackson's loyalty to her memory was well known. If he could find love again, perhaps there was hope for lasting peace. Admiral Morrison's voice, when it came, was thoughtful. "Commander Reed, are you prepared to stake your career on this woman and this alliance?" "Yes, sir, without reservation." Warlord Thane's response was slower in coming. "Daughter, you risk everything on the word of one human. How do you know he will not betray you as he did his orders?" Kestra smiled, her hand still clasped in Jackson's. "Because, Father, I have learned to trust not just his words, but his heart, and his heart is true." The silence stretched between the fleets until finally Admiral Morrison spoke. "Stand down weapons, prepare a boarding party, diplomatic not military." "As you wish," Warlord Thane said, though his tone suggested the conversation was far from over. 6 months later, the wedding ceremony that united Kestra Thaneborn and Jackson Reed took place not in the sterile confines of a diplomatic vessel, but on the neutral world of Haven's Rest, under skies painted with the colors of two suns. Representatives from dozens of worlds attended, witnessing not just a marriage, but the birth of a new kind of alliance, one built on choice rather than obligation, love rather than fear. As they spoke their vows in both languages, mixing human and Veltharani traditions, Kestra and Jackson knew they had found something rarer than peace between worlds. They had found peace within themselves and with each other. The stars that had witnessed their orbital dance now shone down on a love that had grown from rejection to acceptance, from fear to trust, from duty to choice. And in that love, two peoples found a bridge to a future neither could have imagined alone.